Welcome to the very first episode of the Future of Engagement podcast. In this episode, David and I discuss what engagement is, why leadership behaviors are so important to engagement, and we give you some tips on how you can engage your team. Hope you enjoy.
Good morning, Dr. Brian Peters.
Morning.
And let me start off by saying congratulations on becoming Dr. Brian Peters. I know that you've recently become Dr. Brian Peters, and I've been working really hard on that. So once again, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
And it's nice to be partnering with you too on the planned series that we have on engagement that we've titled The Future of Engagement, because you have a very fascinating background, many different leadership positions that have led you to the spot of being now an expert in the field of engagement, or the subject area of engagement and the science of engagement, with now a PhD to support that. But your history that has led up to this is absolutely fascinating, including your early background in the Marine Corps through corporate America, and then becoming a corporate leader and a scholar. So why don't you give us a little glimpse of your background? I'm sure people will find that fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. So I, as you mentioned, I was a machine gunner in the Marines with one tour in Afghanistan. After I got out of the Marines, I wanted to go into clinical psychology. Was originally what I was going to do. I was going to do substance abuse. Grew up around a lot of people who were addicted to various drugs. So I was going to go down that route. I also started working for a youth alcohol and drug education program. Started off what they call a visitation facilitator. So we would take kids to like level 1 trauma hospitals and stuff, show them kind of what can happen if you're making some not so good decisions. I did that for a while, ended up becoming the assistant to the program manager. Basically, I was helping run the program for them. And during that time, I just realized that like clinical psychology is not going to be for me. I love the program. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist after COVID, but it was a great program. We helped a lot of kids, but I just realized like I was taking on too much of, like, when things weren't successful, that was just really hard for me. And I realized, hey, if I go into clinical, it's going to be a lot of that. So I started to kind of pivot what I want to do. So after I got my undergrad in psychology, again, was still working for the alcohol and drug education program. Decided to go and get my master's in psychology with an emphasis in industrial organizational psychology, because, I started to think about how important the workplace is and how much time we spend in the workplace and how much that can affect everybody's life. So if I'm not going to help people, get off drugs or alcohol, or in a clinical setting, I can't help people in the workplace, which people spend a lot of time in. So ended up doing that at around the time that I decided to go get my master's. My wife was active duty Army, so we ended up going to Maryland. That's when I got into HR. So started as an HR generalist for a local community college, and continued down that career path. Over the next 10 years, went and got, again, my master's, ended up going into my PhD program. I've owned a couple businesses throughout that time, some successful, some not. Learned a lot doing those things, and then kind of progressed through the ranks in HR, whereas, an HR manager overseeing an area of 7,000 employees, primarily dealing in employee relations and labor relations. But I've been fortunate to see both good and bad leadership or management during that time. So till today, where I'm still in HR, but now with this doctorate, I'm also looking at doing some consulting and helping organizations just improve the workplace.
Well, that's fantastic. And again, we are so excited to be partnering together in the field of engagement. You know that just briefly, I've got a background in psychology myself, and have written a couple of popular books, including How to Mind Read Your Customers and How to Hire a Champion, which have been used pretty extensively in the corporate training and recruiting worlds. And I've always had a, long-standing interest in engagement too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is engagement actually? And, as part of our partnership, we have our own software program, our own analytic tool to look at the behaviors that exist within corporations and if they're actually driving engagement, yes or no. And so one of the things I'm most fascinated about in our partnership is you literally are an engagement scientist.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at reality. You're looking at data, and you're analyzing that data to find out, and something that you've written about extensively in your dissertation is what is engagement and what actually creates a positive engagement and what detracts from that. You're not just giving that lip service. You're not talking about in a theoretical standpoint. You're looking at the facts of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also coming, again, from an early background in the Marine Corps. When they talk about things like leadership, it's not fluffy.
Mm-hmm.
They get very specific as to what they mean by leadership in the Marine Corps, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that we're trying to translate that type of accuracy and specificity into looking at ways to improve engagement in the business world. So one of the things that I suppose fascinates me the most is in our conversations, you came up with 3 major points that sort of are the overarching discussion points in the world of engagement that we will continue to talk about in this series, which we're calling The Future of Engagement. One would be leadership. That leadership is fundamental to engagement. But you're mostly interested in leadership behaviors, right? Things you can see with your eyes, not just theories and fluff, but things that people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
B, you're really big on communication, the way that you communicate with the people around you, how you communicate, the spirit of the communication, but also the accuracy in the words of the communication are huge for you. And also C, creating cultures where there is some autonomy and you're creating a culture of creativity and collaboration. That's also very big for you.
Mm-hmm.
So to start this off, this might sound like a silly question, but I think we should identify it. I would like to know from a guy who now has his doctorate literally in engagement, what is engagement?
Yeah.
People talk about that all the time. They just throw it around. They go, we need engagement in the workplace. Engagement is key. And a lot of stuff that sounds extremely fluffy to me. But what is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I know what it is to be engaged to someone and get married. I've been through that, and so have you, but I don't know, what does the word engagement in the workplace mean to you? What is engagement?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So there's the sort of clinical definition of engagement, right? What you see in literature, which when engagement was first sort of coined, it was looked at as absorption, dedication, absorption, dedication, and sort of commitment to your work, right? Like, so you're really invested in what you do. I think Sherm has a good definition of this, which is just basically people who are committed and connected to the organization, which I think is a pretty good definition, right?
That's excellent.
That really helps us understand what it is and kind of what to do about that in the workplace.
Excellent. So when you're talking about engagement, you want people to actually be more connected, but not just a feeling. Like, I feel really good. Like, someone told me today that they like me, and I have a friend because someone said, you're my friend. Well, that's cool and everything. I mean, I'm glad you have a friend in the workplace. But beyond that, we're also talking about engagement with the job, right? You understand your job and you understand what it is that you are doing, and you like doing what you're doing because you have a sense of confidence in that you're going to be able to excel because people have told you what's expected of you and they've given you the tools and the training to do that, right? I mean, is that not part of engagement too?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, so there's a system out there called Traction that I think breaks that down very simply for people, and what I like to use, which is get it, want it, capacity to do it, right? So do you understand your role? Do you understand your role within the context of the organization, right? Because your role at one organization might be slightly different, even if it's the same title and general responsibilities, right? Do you want to do the role? Like, I always tell employees, like, if you get up in the morning and say, I don't want to go to work, like that might happen some mornings. If it's happening most mornings, you probably have a want it issue, right? Like you don't want to do the job. And capacity, do you have the background, knowledge, expertise, certifications, whatever, to actually perform the role? And I think that's a really good way to kind of break it down simply for people. If you look at those three things, I think it encompasses everything that you just mentioned.
Yeah. So also you've been talking, we'll spend a lot of time in this first part talking about leadership and leadership behaviors. And then, parts 2 and 3 will drill down more into communication and what is good communication, bad communication, then what is a collaborative team in the third episode. But in this one, we're going to pretty much stick with leadership and the impact of leadership and leadership behaviors. And again, I think it's really fascinating that you say you prefer talking about leadership behaviors as opposed to leadership styles, because leadership behaviors, you've told me in your opinion, gets a lot more specific.
Yeah.
And shows us things that can be improved. I mean, I think it's fascinating that you said a leadership style can't really be improved. Like, how do you improve a leadership style? That's kind of theoretical. You can't improve a theoretical concept, but you can change a behavior. And that's pretty fascinating to me, that we can emphasize that. So I want you to talk a little bit about what types of behaviors you're talking about and we're seeing, because I can tell you, as the chief sales officer for a software company, among other things that I do, there's a lot of bad leadership that I see in the world where people are saying that they're leaders, and it all sounds nice, but when you look at the interactions that they have with human beings in the day, they're not authentic. And people know it's BS. I'm sorry. They know it's not authentic. They know it's not real, and it makes the problem worse.
Yeah.
And furthermore, they walk about all day long posting things on LinkedIn about leadership styles. And meanwhile, during the day, they're demoralizing people and people want to quit. I mean, that's just the reality. It's kind of ludicrous.
Yeah.
So tell me, what are some leadership behaviors that you know are fundamental and often overlooked to driving success and engagement among the people that you are supposed to be leading in the workplace?
That's funny. Like, as you're talking about that, and you said, they're not authentic. It's like, they just need to be more authentic leadership style, right? That's how you fix that problem, which is just ridiculous, right? Like, what does that mean?
Nothing. I have no idea.
Yeah.
What are some of the leadership traits and behaviors that are critically important to you that are not styles or not fluffy concepts like authentic leadership, but real pivotal things that people have to get right in order to be a true leader and to help foster and motivate success in the workplace for the people that you're supposed to lead? What are those leadership behaviors?
Yeah. So if you look at a lot of the literature, it's interesting. So a lot just talks about leadership styles, right? A lot of what you see will say, transformational leadership is the best, or authentic leadership is the best. And like you were saying, like, it just doesn't mean anything, right? It's like, but if you look a little bit deeper at what they're talking about, it's all these different behaviors, right? And they actually cross over. Authentic leader, whatever that means, will have certain behaviors that also transformational leaders, they might have some differences, right? But they have a lot of crossover. If you look at what anybody talks about effective styles, they have a lot of crossover. And a lot of what you see in that is it's leaders that are supporting their employees, or we'll just say employees, right? So they're supporting their employees. They are communicating. They are doing things like active listening, right? They're actually not, and I know that kind of can get fluffy or whatever, but basically they're listening to what the person's saying, not just trying to give a response, right? They're actually hearing what their employees saying. They're creating space for employees to ask questions, talk about support they need, things like that. They're communicating well with their employees. They're delegating tasks. They're giving them more responsibility. They're setting goals. They're very involved leaders, right? To a point, right? You don't want to be overly involved, right? If you get to micromanagement, that kind of ends up being a problem. You are creating space for innovation. You're allowing people to fail sometimes, right? Failure is okay. And there's this idea in business I see a lot that, we don't want to fail. This has to go perfect. And that's just ridiculous. It's just, you're not going to innovate that way. If you don't create space where people are going to push and try new things, you're just not going to innovate. You're going to stay stagnant, right? So you have leaders who are doing that. And that really keeps people excited about what they're doing because they get to try new things. They get to learn. They get to push themselves. They get to grow. And because leadership is so important, these making sure that you coach these behaviors in leaders rather than saying you need more of a transformational leader. Say, you need to listen to your employees when they're talking. When they ask for support, you provide support that you can provide for them, right? There's sometimes people request things that just not possible, right? But where you can.
I think I have a good example to that. I saw a CEO actually, CEO of the software company that I work with, do something quite remarkable yesterday. We had a fantastic call with a person with a large organization that became a client yesterday, and we wouldn't have been on that call if it hadn't been for a salesperson who made at least 12 phone calls. Her level of persistence is off the charts. Mm-hmm. I think she called this prospect 12 or 13 times until they finally decided to say yes, they would talk to us. And if it hadn't been for her, we wouldn't have been on the call. But we were on the call, and of course, she joined us for that, because I always, when I'm building teams, if someone is successful at something, I have the whole team involved in the project from beginning to end, and that seems to work out. But after it was over, the CEO sent a broadcast message on WhatsApp to the entire company and praised her and said, we just want to remember that while we had some success here, we wouldn't have been here without her, the salesperson who made the 13th call and got us here. And I just want to say, you're a rock star. Have a great weekend. You mean a lot to us. It was astounding. And so I texted him back immediately and I went, that's leadership. Mm-hmm. That's the epitome of leadership. Good for you. And I see so many people in the workplace, Brian, who do the opposite of that. They're all about negativity, criticism. They're cold. They're aloof. They never do what just happened. They never say thank you. They never say you're a rock star. They just offer their criticism in a snotty way. I think it's idiotic, but it's in so many places. Why are people still continuing to act in the criticizing way that I've just described when there's a mountain of evidence out there to show that it doesn't work, and that the only thing that actually does work is the type of support that CEO showed to the young lady yesterday? Why is that?
Out of all the organizations that you've seen, how many have you seen have true leadership training programs for new leaders?
I've seen a lot of people subjected to extremely crappy leadership programs. Okay. I would say that.
Let's say good leadership So, I mean, one of the biggest issues that I see is that typically when somebody becomes a leader, they're a leader because they were a subject matter expert. They're really good at their job, and you need to lead these people. And then after that, there's nothing, right? Just kind of figure out how to lead people. And so some people are good at that naturally, right? That does exist out there. People just know how to interact with other people. But I think the vast majority don't, right? There's this idea. When I talk to new leaders, we talk about the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And I'm like, that's a fine starting place. But where I'd like you to get is do unto others basically treat them the way that they want to be treated, right? Rather than treating them the way that you want to be treated, like get to know them and make sure that you're communicating in a way that's effective for them, that you're giving them the resources that they need, right? Rather than just saying, well, it was like that for me, so I'm just going to keep going like that. Like that's a big thing too. It's like, well, I had to deal with the hardship, so they just need to get over it. Yeah, but did you like it when you had to deal with that bad boss or whatever? Probably not, right? But you're just perpetuating that. So there's a lot of issues here, but one of those is, again, we just don't do good leadership training. So we just take experts, we throw them in there, and we say, figure it out. And a lot of times, unfortunately, the leaders don't get blamed for the attrition that happens because of that, or the low productivity or anything like that. It ends up being their employees that get fired or written up or whatever. We need to take more time at saying, okay, this person's really good at their job and we see some traits in them that we think would be a good leader. Let's foster that, right? Like, let's take them. It doesn't have to necessarily be a formal program. You could just say, I see this person as on track to become a leader. Let's start coaching them on different things that they could work on to be that better leader when they, like, if you don't have the resources to have a nice, robust training system, there are things that you can do that can be beneficial more informally. Right. But we just I don't see that often.
Okay. So let me ask you a question, since you're a doctor in this field. There are two things I think that are running in parallel, but they're not in sync. One thing that is extremely valuable right now is technology. I mean, leveraging technology and even AI to get an enormous increase in the analytics that you put into the thoughts and plans that you have of making strategic business decisions. But you have to have the right type of mentality, or the right spirit, the mentality in the brain of people that are using the information that technology can provide them with to make good things happen. Technology is fabulous, but we don't have oftentimes the leadership to make the most of that technology. Let me give you a good example of something that I love. So I use Zoom chats a lot to talk with my sales team. And the other day we had a chat where we were trying to overcome a hurdle and trying to get, better traction with some of the people that we were trying to call, like certain groups in the marketplace. So I don't think I spoke 3 sentences during the entire meeting. I just let everybody else talk. I said, okay, people, we're unable to be as successful in crossing over this hurdle as we would like. So since you are on the front lines, interacting with customers, seeing what the barriers are, what do you think we should do? And everybody started talking. Well, I think we should do this. Well, I think we should do that. I think we're spending too long on the phone. I think we should make it shorter. I think we should bring our pitch down to 45 seconds. I think we should go over this group. I think we shouldn't talk to people who have this title. It's just a waste of time. They talked for 30 minutes. And when I got off the phone, off of the Zoom chat, rather, AI had analyzed the entire conversation and given us a strategic plan with high detail, telling us what we needed to do that week in order to create more traction. Mm-hmm. And all of the information, the ideas and the plan came from the team. They didn't come from me. AI synthesized the ideas of the team when I let them talk and listen about their experiences and said, this makes a lot of sense. Your team is telling you that you need to do this. So I, got back with the team. I said, seems like a really great plan. Now that I'm looking at the synthesis of your thoughts, let's go do that. They did it, and our effectiveness quadrupled the next day. So that was just listening to the team and doing what the team said. However, I guess the point that I'm making is technology can enable, us to understand what people are articulating as ideas in our workplace like we never could have imagined a couple of years ago. But we still have people who are still living in the world of stupidity where they won't actually give people a chance to talk. so that their ideas can be analyzed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge barrier. Why is that barrier still there? Why are so many people in leadership positions completely adamant that they're not going to listen to the people around them? They're only going to tell people what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is it an ego thing? I mean, what is it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of leaders suffer from a bit of imposter syndrome, right? And so you have to always be the subject matter expert, right? Like, again, you started probably as a subject matter expert, you were promoted. And so their value, I think, tends to come from, or they believe their perceived value comes from having the answers. And I mean, it's something that I've struggled with as well, whereas like, I feel like I always need to have the answers. I don't want to say that I don't know. I have a friend of mine who was the CEO of one of the companies that I was helping run, and I admire that he has no ego in anything. Like, he has no problem ever saying I don't know, right? Like, he'll just be in a room and listen to everybody. He'll give his opinion, right? But he is also okay with being wrong and other people having better ideas than him. And I really looked at that and said, I need to adjust as well, right? Because I let my ego get the best of me. I think a lot of people do, especially when you're a young leader, and I mean young as in new to being leadership, not necessarily an age thing, right? So yeah, I do think it's a lot of ego. Like, they're in that position. They're in that position of authority. So they have to have the answers. If they don't, why are they in that position of authority? Not realizing they're in that position of authority because they need to lead those people. They should be helping foster those ideas. They should be helping those good ideas rise up, because if their team is successful, then they're successful, right? So their team's accomplishments do look good for the leader. But I think often it just gets overlooked. And again, since we're not doing much coaching in this, and if you have a bad leader too, right? If you're a mid-level manager and the senior manager is also poor and is expecting you to have all the answers, that trickles down. I mean, I've met very few people who are good at blocking that and protecting their team. There are some that I've met, but a lot of times it just trickles down. And so you have these bad habits go down. And so I think it's educating new leaders and also selecting the right people for that role. Not everybody's going to be a leader. Not everybody wants it either, right? And so understanding, people who are ready at that time or people who need more coaching, right? People who you think are going to listen to others, that aren't going to have that ego about it, right? You got to try to select the right person, again, not just the subject matter expert. So yeah, it's a big problem. And I do think ego is a big part of that we need to try to get past and let leaders know it's okay that you don't know everything. That's why you have a team. You're not expected to know everything. I guess one more note on that. It's actually interesting. So to me, at least, we're looking, company I work for, looking for a senior leader. And the person that we were looking at bringing on board actually doesn't have any experience in the industry. Has experience in related industry, but not directly in our industry. And I was talking with the account director, and they were concerned about that. And I said, well, they said, well, they're good with people though, and they're like really good, they're a people leader. I said, well, that's really what you need. Like, you could teach some of the other stuff. They don't need to know everything. They need to know enough when people aren't, who are BSing their way through it, or who aren't being honest, or who aren't doing their job. They need to know enough for that, but they don't need to know how to turn the wrenches, right? They don't need to know that. They need to be able to lead people and get the best out of people and help them be successful. That's what they need to do. We could teach the rest, right? But it's if you have somebody that's already a people person, that's great if you can slot them in. Again, if they know at least enough to not get fooled by people around them that might not have the best of intentions.
Yeah, I'd like to wrap up and put a bow on the end of this episode number 1 on leadership behaviors at work by having you just give 3 or 4 tips, and we're going to end every episode like this. Well, why don't you go out there and do these 4 things this week and then come back and tell me, didn't it get better? So we're going to end this up, as we will everyone, with Dr. Brian Peters' 4 tips on how to make this better. Just go out there and I'll try this. But I would like to give 1 tip myself, I think, to kind of tee you up. One thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure that you will appreciate this as a scientist, because I've done, as you scientific research in psychology myself. And being a person who has done research and is concerned about outcomes, I like to know what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to know, what have we overlooked? What have we missed? As every scientist does. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but every scientist wants to know one question: what have we overlooked?
Yeah.
Okay, the patient's not getting better. What have we overlooked? What's wrong? I just don't think that I have all the answers. I would think it would be ludicrous for me to assume that if I haven't figured it out already, that I know what's wrong. But so many leaders do that. They go, well, I know what's wrong. How? You didn't know what was wrong yesterday. You have no additional information or facts to show you anything differently. So how do you know what to do if you didn't know yesterday? That's just not scientific. That's just not rational. The only way that I know to try and uncover what are we missing is to ask somebody else, right? That's what scientists do.
Yeah.
You look as many pieces of evidence as you can, and you get your people around you, and you simply ask them, what did we miss? And then you let them tell you, and then you go, aha, Dr. Ryan Peters, I think you've hit on it. And then you go off and you do something differently. That's my tip. I think you ask other human beings, what are we missing here? And then you listen to them. So that's my tip for the day. Do you think I'm right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, why don't you take us home by just giving people 3 or 4 ideas on, if you want to be a better leader and you want to see better outcomes for the people that you're leading and results, 3 things that are important that you might focus on this week.
Yeah. So I don't know. I want to start with one that I don't know. I can give some more if needed, but is for leaders to recognize how critically important they are. Like, they need to sit with that for a minute and realize like how big of an impact they have on the well-being of their employees, on their productivity, on their performance, all of that, right? We're talking about engagement. It impacts all of that stuff. So if a leader's not realizing that, or has not sat with that and realized how critical their role is, doesn't mean they're better than their employees, right? But their role is incredibly important. They should spend some time thinking about that and really sitting with that.
Good point.
And realizing how critical it is.
Good point.
And that they're, so much so that the way that they impact the work environment can also impact the employee's personal life, right? It does cross over, and there's plenty of research that shows that. So I think that that's a good place for anybody to start. Like, if they haven't done that, they should do that, right? Realize, you sit with it, think about it, think about their behaviors, what they're doing, kind of the interactions that they're having. Another thing that I see that leaders often don't do effectively because they're really busy. A lot of people are really busy. Most organizations I've seen aren't staffed to where people aren't super busy all the time. But having regular one-on-ones with their employees, I recommend weekly. Sometimes that's not feasible, so maybe bi-weekly. I wouldn't do less than bi-weekly personally. But it's not only just having them, but the quality of the meeting, right? So it's not the leaders meeting, it's the employees meeting, right? So if they are having one-on-ones, to shift the focus. Some questions that I always like to ask is like, what's working, what's not working, right? It's simple, open-ended question. Hey, tell me what's working. I even do this in exit interviews, right? It's like, hey, tell me what's working, what's not working. It's a simple question that can get a lot of feedback. And in that, have sort of that, and this, I guess, could be another tip that can work for any interaction with employees, is the pregnant pause. You talked about, listening more. I think the pregnant pause is a really important thing. Silence makes people uncomfortable, but that's good sometimes, right? And gives space for people to talk. So when they're having this conversation and, there's a lull, let that last a little bit. You don't have to fill that void, because that might get the employee to talk more. I mean, you don't want to get to the point where it's super awkward. It doesn't have to be long, but it's like, they're talking or you're talking and you stop, take a drink of water, and it could be just that long, but like, allow for some silence. We don't have to fill every space. I don't know how many tips that was, but I think, but those are things I think are really easy to start that can have huge impacts, right? If you have one-on-ones with people, you have quality one-on-ones, and you're asking the right questions. What's working, what's not working? How can I support you? Like, what could I be doing to better support you in your role?
I think you nailed it. I think that is a lot of good information to go away and think about for the next week or so, and it will tie in beautifully to our second podcast, which is all going to be about communication skills. I found the thing that you said at the very end to be probably one of the most important concepts in the world, in business and in life itself, is how can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you just said.
Yeah.
That's what seems to be missing 99% of the time when things don't go right, and I see really extremely poor leadership. The leader hasn't said, "How can I help you?"
Mm-hmm.
I think you just nailed it.
Yeah.
So let's take those 3 points. Let's go out and use those for the next week or so. See if they improved anything, and then we're going to come back for our next podcast, and we're going to talk about how to improve your communication. So in the meantime, Dr. Brian Peters, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service, and thank you for your leadership.
Thanks. Great.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for watching the very first episode of the Future of Engagement podcast. We'd love to hear from you down in the comments. Also, if you give us a like, it really helps us out. If you want to be notified for future episodes, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next one.